Hi, and welcome back to my channel, where I'm going to cover the Ranger's Beast Master class specialization, providing a brief description of the subclass, as well as explain and set up the various features that are gained. The Beast Master is where the Ranger becomes one with the creatures of the land, allowing them to take a beast as a companion. Where a druid can shapeshift into a beast, the Beastmaster learns to work with those that already exist naturally, building a bond that allows the beast to benefit from the Beastmaster's own proficiencies. Over time, as the Beastmaster's bond becomes stronger with their companion, additional abilities are unlocked that allow the two to work almost as if they were one. A player who likes the idea of working with an animal-based companion will love this kind of character, but it's not without its risks. It is possible for the animal companion to give up its life while protecting the ranger, or die during general combat situations, or just due to bad luck while on the road, and it's a very heart-wrenching situation to get into. And as with all ranger class specializations, this subclass is gained at level 3. And as you can see, I've staged our level 2 ranger from the previous videos as our starting point for this one. So with that, let's take a look at the features that this particular class specialization provides as we level the character up. The first thing I will do is ensure that I drop the level onto the character here and select Beastmaster as our specialization. And once that level is applied, we are now going to acquire our first feature called Ranger's Companion. And right off, there are going to be a number of things that we're going to have to set up to get this thing to work. The first is that you will need to choose a beast whose challenge rating is 1/4 or lower, and is of the beast classification that is no larger than medium size. As a player, to view what options are available to you from an NPC's perspective, you can temporarily go from the Create PC mode, which is what this should have started in, and set it as All so that you can unlock the NPCs button here. Once you've got that unlocked, you can set up your filter, if you will, to be 1/4 or 1/8. Those are the only two that actually have a beast here that will be applicable. And then make sure that you have the type set as beast, and that will reduce the listing that you see here to those that are available. So as you can see, under the 1/4 classification, we have a boar, constrictor snake, panther, riding horse, and a wolf, while under the 1/8 one, we have a mastiff, mule, and a poisonous snake. Once you have selected a beast, and for the purposes of this example, I'm going to choose the wolf, you will then have to work with the Dungeon Master to create a modified version of this quote-unquote NPC sheet that will be assigned to your particular character. And the reason is you can't modify this character sheet and you cannot unlock it. It's a read-only copy of this particular creature. So I'm going to quickly drag over the Dungeon Master screen and drag and drop this particular creature that I want into the same NPCs page that you see here. And what that does is that creates a copy of this particular wolf and sets it up in an uncategorized grouping. So if I narrow this grouping listing down to just uncategorized, we'll see the wolf. The next thing that has to happen is that this needs to be modified to take into account all of the additional changes we will have to add to it because of the benefits of what the Ranger provides for this particular creature. Now I've gone ahead and closed out all the other windows. I am still within the Dungeon Master's screen here, and we will see that I have the creature open here, the Beastmaster's class specialization information here, and the Ranger's Companion sheet here. And we will use this Ranger's Companion sheet as the reference for the changes we will need to make here. The first thing that we will need to do is ensure that we take our NPC's stats and add in the character's proficiency bonus, which in this case is a +2. And that information is, let's see, can I do this? No, it's going to keep that as read only. Right here in this particular paragraph here. So we have to add the proficiency bonus to the beast's armor class, attack rolls, damage rolls, as well as any saving throws and skills it is proficient in. So let's take care of that first. Well, the first thing we're going to modify is the armor class. That is now going to be a 15. But we want to keep track of what the original armor class was before we made this change. And I like doing that just by simply putting in that information here and indicate that it's now the natural armor of 13 plus the proficiency bonus. We're not going to worry about the hit points just yet, but we do also need to make adjustments to our perception and our stealth skills here. So perception is going to be a +5. And in brackets, I'm going to put a 3 as the original value. And our stealth is going to be a +6. And I'm going to leave a 4 in the brackets to show us what its original value was. Unfortunately, however, the wolf is not quote-unquote proficient in any given saving throw, so we'll have to rely on the values that are already set as the official bonuses when the creature is created. We still, however, need to modify the attack and damage bonuses, and we can do that by scrolling down a little bit to get to the actions section. And just go quickly through this. Okay, no, so there's no additional changes we have to make here. So it's literally just going to be to this section here. We will want +6 to hit. And the actual damage is going to be +4. And then I'm just going to make a note, original plus, I think it was 4 to hit. And +2 to damage. And that's just as a reminder so that when this particular character's proficiency increases, we need to make sure that we adjust these to match. And that is everything that we have to adjust when it comes to the character sheet. The problem is, it's the Dungeon Master that has to make these particular changes if we use this particular method and go about making these adjustments. I feel, however, that there is in fact a better way to go about doing this. And I'm going to show that to you in a second. Right now, though, this particular NPC is not quote-unquote accessible to the player yet. If I minimize this and we go back to this particular player page, we don't see that our creature is there yet. If I reopen the Dungeon Master screen and then take this particular icon here and drop it over top of our character, what'll happen is that the character sheet now pops open as it is now shared with your character and your character alone. The first thing you're going to want to do is drag and drop that into one of your quick bar slots so that if you unintentionally close this particular page, if you will, then you'll be able to very quickly open it up. And this acts as a toggle once you set it there. So 1 second, I'm going to go return my Dungeon Master screen back to the window it was on so that I can focus on the player side of it. Now, as I said, I honestly believe there is actually a better way to go about setting this particular set of bonuses and adjustments up before we actually set up and access our wolf through its own combat page, if you will. And what I want to do here is, if the system will let me, I'm going to drop this into place here. Excellent, it does. And I'm going to call this Beast Master as the group. And that is going to be the power group that this particular skill or ability will be under. Now what I want to do is add an effect to this particular skill or ability and modify that so that we can add all of the changes that go on here to our wolf as an effect. So I'm going to call this Ranger's Companion, semicolon, and the first thing we're going to modify is the wolf's AC. And what we want to do is set it up so that our proficiency bonus is applied to the wolf. Then we want to set up the actual saving throws. Now, unfortunately, with relation to the saving throws, it has to be something that it is proficient in. Yeah, so to any skill or to any saving throws and skills it is proficient in. Unfortunately, the wolf has no saving throw proficiencies, but it does have 2 skills here that it is proficient in. In this particular case, it's perception and stealth. So what we want to do is this: skill colon, we want to add our proficiency bonus again, and then we want to actually define what proficiencies, or skills rather, it is going to gain those bonuses to. So we want perception, comma, stealth, semicolon. Now we want to modify the attack rolls, so ATK, colon, PRF, semicolon, and then finally the damage, PRF, and then semicolon. The only thing that we're not going to be able to adjust through this method is the total number of hit points that our wolf has. Now, before I get to dealing with the hit points, I want to showcase a couple of things that are going to be slightly problematic. The first is, whenever you're in a combat situation, you can't simply make your rolls through this particular page unless you've modified this particular page to deal with the actual changes. So where we added the +2 here to our hit and +2 to our damage, the effect won't come into play when you double click this. And I'll show you what I mean. You'll see here that we've already got the +6 to hit. That means that we've already set up the wolf's bonus, to include the +2 bonus from our character's proficiency. But every time our character's proficiency changes, we now have to make a modification to the wolf's character sheet to increase that value. This is why I think the effect is going to be better, because all we have to do is drop and reapply the effect to our wolf whenever we have an increase in our proficiency bonuses here. Now, when this wolf makes an attack against, say, this succubus, for example, if I were to simply pick this up and drop this into place on the succubus, we get our +6 bonus. That should have been +8 with this in place. What actually has to happen, and I will drag the DM screen back here, is that the Dungeon Master has to make use of these options that exist within the Dungeon Master side. So they would drag, let's say, the attack effect onto the succubus, and we'll see an increase here where we have the +8. So we're now hitting with a higher bonus than we should be hitting, but the bonus that we're applying through the effect is now coming into play. So both have their advantages and their trade-offs. The trade-off is that the saving throws have to be modified in order for the actual skills to come into play. The armor class doesn't have to be, and that is evident when we take this attack here from the succubus, say, and drop it onto the wolf. We had an 11. It rolled a 16. Well, by default, the wolf has an AC of 15. That means that our +2 to the AC pushed this up over 17, making the 16 a miss. So you can see it here, defense effects +2. It's part of the description. So we know for a fact that all of these are coming into play with the exception of the perception and stealth skill checks. That, unfortunately, is something that I don't have an immediate solution for, but I'm going to sort of fiddle around for a little bit, see if I can come up with something that might actually work here. Unfortunately, there is no way to indicate a perception or stealth check in relation to something we could make use of through the combat tracker when it comes to the Dungeon Master side of it, because the effects themselves, whenever you set up a creature, have a very specific tag, if you will, that gets associated with those particular things. So, for example, you see here we have this M tag this ATK tag, this DMG tag, this save versus tag, and this EFF tag. Well, what this means is that this is a melee attack. It's an attack of +4 to its original bonus, DMG of 2d4 plus 2 piercing, a saving throw so that the target has to make a saving throw against a strength 11 check, and if they fail that, we would apply the effect, and that effect is called prone. These are all of the tags that you can get, with the exception of an R for ranged, heal for any healing that occurs, and an R colon to indicate the number of rounds of something. There is no CHK capability that can be added here, and that's kind of lacking in my opinion when it comes to Fantasy Grounds, but I understand why it's not there. It's probably something that hasn't been thought of, to be honest. Having said that, what can be done is that you can leave the adjustments inside of the actual NPC character sheet, so that when you actually go ahead and roll a perception check for this particular case, we will see that it's taken the +5 bonus, and if we roll stealth, it will take the +6 bonus that we have indicated here. I have reverted the bite action to its original +4 to hit and its original +2 to damage, because we now have something that takes care of adding that damage through the effect. We can, in addition, modify the effect to remove the stealth or the skill bonus here. So let's get rid of everything here and just leave it so that we have the AC, the ATK, and the DMG increases occurring. That way, you only really have to minimize the adjustments that have to be made to your perception, your stealth, and the hit points of the creature itself. Okay, so now what about the hit points? Well, the hit points are very clearly defined as being adjustments to, where is it here? Its hit point maximum equals the normal maximum, or 4 times your ranger's level. Well, 2d8 plus 2 is quote unquote the normal maximum for this wolf. That means we're missing a significant number of hit points. Oh, by the way, I also reverted the armor back to its natural value, because that's handled by the +2 proficiency bonus here. But in relation to the hit points, we're level 3. That means that this wolf, normal times 4 times, could potentially have a maximum of 12 hit points. When we hit level 4, that'll be a maximum of 16 hit points. So we're going to have to be constantly adjusting this as we move forward. As this particular wolf would benefit from having the extra hit points, I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I make that adjustment in the Dungeon Master screen here. And I'm going to unlock this and set it as 12. And then relock it so that we can benefit, or rather our character's companion will benefit from our character's level. And that completes pretty much everything that we have to do here when it comes to setting up this wolf. So let's move on with the rest of the points made through the Ranger's Companion description sheet here. The first is that when you are in a combat situation, the wolf is going to go on your initiative. It is not going to acquire its own initiative. And the reason for that is that you actually need to command it. If you don't command it, the only thing it's going to do is dodge. And this is where I think some players can potentially run into some problems. The main issue is that the wolf is not set up to act independent of you when it comes to a combat situation. In fact, no companion is. As your character levels, you gain the ability to do extra things with your companion throughout a combat round or throughout a particular round, but you always control what that creature does, and whether it's you that does something or whether it's the creature that does something. This means that either you get to attack or it does, but not both of you. And if you don't command the beast during that given round, it'll just simply dodge. You do get the ability to verbally command it to move about without any loss of action. Essentially, you're using your own free action to command it to move, but you need to burn your own action to get it to attack, dash, disengage, or help another party member. Only when you acquire the extra attack feature at level 5 do you gain the ability to make a single weapon-related attack in combination with having the creature use their attack action. And sort of think of it as your companion is a weapon that you would normally be holding in your hand during an encounter, but because it's an animal, you can't hold it. It really is nothing more than an extension of you. And what this means is that instead of you holding a sword and making a melee-based attack, you're quote-unquote holding an animal companion that is making that attack through your command. If that doesn't make any sense, let me know, because it's been a very difficult way to try to describe what it is that I'm trying to explain here. Instead of you having a staff that you use to cast a spell, or a sword that you use to swing at something, or a bow that you shoot an arrow with, you have a companion that you do all of that with. So, like the fighter has the weapons, you have the companion that is your weapon. And hopefully that will actually clarify why it is difficult for you, your own character, and the companion to make separate attacks independent of each other, because you're essentially linked. You're communicating in a way that you're acting as one in combat scenarios or in other situations. However, when not in combat situations, for example, when you're traveling with your companion in favored terrain, but only with your companion, you can move about at an even pace or your normal pace, even when you're trying to be stealthy, thus giving you a speed advantage when passing through that kind of terrain. So, for instance, let's say you chose a forest as your favored terrain, and you and your companion are traveling through it, but the rest of your party is going around it for some reason. Maybe you're trying to cut off a particular party that you're looking to catch up to. You and your companion will be able to move at an equivalent normal pace and potentially catch up to that group, whereas the group that you're chasing might not have that benefit, so they're moving at half speed. You can still be stealthy and move at normal speed. So you do gain a quote-unquote traveling benefit, if you will, or rather your companion doesn't get hindered because you're traveling through terrain that might be a little bit more difficult. That would be another way to look at it. And finally, what happens if your companion dies? Well, you are able to acquire another beast, but it has to be non-hostile to you. And you must spend 8 hours essentially attuning to it, if you will, in order for it to become your companion. It does not have to be the same type of beast that you had before. You can choose an entirely different beast, but it still has to have a challenge rating that matches the 1/4 challenge rating. Can be no larger than a medium-sized creature, has to be a beast, so it still sits within those restrictions. Now, that doesn't mean, however, that a dungeon master can't arrange for a quest to be created. Let's say you had lost your companion and you're looking to replace it, where within the bounds of that particular campaign, the DM has decided to give you a creature or allow you to try to team up with a creature that has a challenge rating of 1 or 2 or 3, depending on your own level. So you as a level 12 character might be able to actually go through and tame a much stronger creature. I still feel that it would fall under the beast category and that your size limitation might still be there, but the dungeon master may be able to provide a little bit of leeway in that respect. I don't think he can give leeway in relation to the beast aspect. I think it requires the creature to be a beast. But again, there's still a little bit of freedom that can come into play. So don't be discouraged of not being able to, say, acquire a dire wolf of some kind, or maybe even a large bear, or anything along those particular lines. It may have to be a conversation that you and the dungeon master have to see if it's even feasible. But that is essentially everything that we have to discuss when it comes to the Ranger's Companion feature. And I hopefully have given you somewhat of a simple way to deal with some of the aspects that have to change. I will go through and showcase what has to happen to the creature when we get to our next skill level, which in this case will be exceptional training, and I believe that's at level 7. Yep. So once we get to that, I will show you what you have to do to modify your companion to make sure that they are brought up to date for that particular level. The next skill gained is called exceptional training, and it is essentially acquired at level 7 and gives you the ability to now command the beast as a bonus action, but still within a limited grouping of actions. So I'm going to go ahead and drop our level into place, and I'll bring this character up to level 7. And then I will explain what you have to do when it comes to your creature. So at this particular point, your creature is now missing hit points, but we've also had a proficiency bonus increase. When it comes to the effects that are added through the combat tracker, which right now there are none, all you have to do is remove the effect that might be there, and then go ahead and, where is it here? Actions. Drop the effect onto the wolf. And you'll see that we now have an increase of 3 points to our damage, an increase of +3 to our attack rolls, and an increase of +3 to our AC, because our proficiency bonus is coming into play here. So that means that our wolf now has an AC of 16. The hit points and our perception and stealth adjustments still have to be made. So let's go ahead and take care of that. Now that is handled on the DM side, and I'm not going to drag the DM screen over because you've seen where I have to go to make those particular adjustments. But when it comes to level 7, that's 7 times 4, which I believe is 28. So our total hit points for a wolf now comes up to 28. There is, however, a minor problem. The wolf here is not coming up to that when it comes to our total number of hit points. I will explain what has to happen there in a second. Our proficiency bonus is now going to be +6 for perception and +7 for stealth. And very quickly we can see that we have adjusted our character, or correction, our beast, to have an increase in hit points as well as an increase in our perception and stealth checks. These are automatically going to be taken into account when it comes to the effect, as is our total armor class. What has to happen to reset, quote unquote, the creature inside of the combat tracker is the DM has to literally remove the old one and drag the new one into place. And where did that go? There he is. And as we can see, we have an increased hit point based wolf. And all we need to do is drop the effect onto it. The other thing that will have to happen is that when the Dungeon Master adds the wolf into the combat tracker, they'll have to make sure that the initiative assigned to that wolf is the same as that linked to your character. Other than that, that's it. So that takes care of what happens when we have to level up our wolf. Now let's take a look at the exceptional training skill, or feature I should say, and figure out what it can do. So if you did not command the beast to attack during your own action round, then you now have the means to get it to take the dash, disengage, or help actions as your own bonus action. So if you're dual wielding, for example, you can make your two-handed attack or one-handed attack with your primary weapon as your extra attack plus your normal attack, but still save your bonus action so that the wolf can do something. In this case, our creature is a wolf, rather than making a bonus attack with your offhand. So you can see how your creature or your companion is becoming an extension of a weapon that you would normally wield in your hands in some way, shape, or form. Essentially, the idea here is that you've become more closely bound with your companion. As a result, you have found a more efficient way to combine your tactics during combat so that you're slowly improving on the coordination between you and your companion. Additionally, the beast's attacks are now classified as magical in nature, meaning that if you are in a particular fight with a creature that is resistant or immune to normal bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing damage, your beast's attacks will still get through those resistances because the damage type is now magical, allowing your beast to apply damage as normal. This means that we do need to make another adjustment to our creature's information sheet. So if we pop the creature open again, you'll see here that it's doing piercing damage. Well, we need to make sure that it's also doing magical damage. In theory, this should work as you would expect. So if we were to, for instance, drop this now onto this succubus, we should see piercing and magic as the damage type, which we do. Let me see if I can find a creature that happens to be resistant to piercing. Alright, so I've gone ahead and added in a white, which is resistant to bludgeoning, piercing, slashing damage that isn't magical. So let's take the damage here and drop it onto this white to see what happens. We see that it took the full amount of damage. This means this is now working the way that we want it to. If I remove magic from that temporarily, make the adjustment on the DM side here, 1 second. So as you can see, I've made the adjustment. If I now drag this damage over onto the white, it'll say partially resisted. So this tells me that by having the keyword comma magic there, that we are still dealing piercing damage, but we are telling the game system that it is of a magical type, not just piercing. And that allows it to bypass the resistances that the white naturally has. Now, once again, the wolf here doesn't have the magic indicator, so the DM is going to have to remove the wolf and then reapply it, and then the effect will have to be reapplied in order for the DM to be able to utilize the attack damage, if you will, directly through the combat tracker, rather than having to drag and drop it like this. But that's literally a minor step. And that takes care of everything that we have to deal with when it comes to exceptional training. At level 11, your character will now acquire the Bestial Fury feature, which essentially gives your beast an extra attack capability, much like that of what your character would normally have gained at level 5. One thing that should be noted, however, is that no creature that you get to start off with when it comes to your initial companion has something called a multi-attack capability. So even if you manage to somehow acquire a creature that has that ability early on, you're only going to be gaining the benefit of the multi-attack feature. Once you get to level 11, your creature can now go through and actually begin, for example, in the case of our wolf, to execute 2 bites whenever they make an attack-based action. There is something that I want to point out here, and that is that if you look closely, the A in attack in both of these cases is capitalized. That's done intentionally. And what it is implying is that it is referring to you making an attack during the actual primary action phase of a given round. So, in case you were not aware, you have a movement phase to it, you have an action phase to it, you have a bonus action phase to it, you have a reaction phase to it, as well as a free action. Free action is generally you talking in some way, shape, or form, or pointing something out, something to that effect. Movement is obvious, that's just your movement around. But when it comes to the action round, or portion of the round, you have attack actions, you have spellcasting actions, you have using something actions, there's a mixture of things that can occur in there. So when they say attack action as being capitalized, they mean your primary action phase, if you will, in a given round. It does not apply to the bonus action phase of things because that's a lowercase a when it comes to referencing an attack. Generally, it's something like an offhand weapon or something to that effect. So even if you now have the ability to command the wolf to execute an attack action during their bonus round, it is a single attack. And in fact, I do believe that under the description of the exceptional training, it states that you can't even do an attack. So let's see, your beast action, Beginning at level 7, on any of your turns when your beast companion doesn't attack, you can use a bonus action to command a beast to take a dash, disengage, or help action on its turn. So it's very specific as to how that applies. So this comes back to the situation of either you make the attacks or your creature does. But now, if it does make the attacks during the action phase, it can do so with 2 bites in the case of our wolf, for example. But essentially, if you have somehow managed to acquire a companion who already has multi-attack capabilities, which is generally like a bite and a swipe of a claw, or maybe 2 claw attacks, something to that effect. Technically, it is making 2 attacks during that particular round through the multi-attack feature. But here's the thing, you would not be able to make use of the extra attack feature to execute 2 executions of multi-attack. That's not how that would work. It's an either or. You either get to choose your extra attack, so maybe you want to do a bite and a claw swipe if that's not what the rules of the multi-attack feature give you, or you do your multi-attack feature, which might be 2 claw swipes. So you don't get an extra attack and a multi-attack. You have to select which of the 2 you're going to use during that particular action round. But in the end, it's designed to give your creature companion a bit more flexibility when actually making those particular attack rounds. There's nothing we have to add when it comes to this particular feature and the actual actions tab. So we're essentially done with Bestial Fury. The last feature you will acquire is called Share Spells, and you gain this when you achieve level 15. With this feature, you essentially now have the ability to affect your companion with any spell that you cast against yourself, i.e. a healing spell. Whenever you cast that spell, both you and the creature will be healed by the amount of points your healing spell applied. But it is not just limited to healing. Essentially, any spell that applies an effect to you that you yourself have cast also can affect your creature. So if you chose to cast Barkskin or Long Stride, the effects of those particular spells would be shared between you and your companion, meaning that your beast would gain the benefits of either one of those spells, depending on which one you cast. So you no longer have to make a choice of, do I protect myself or do I protect my companion? When you hit level 15, you can protect yourself and the same effect will apply to your companion, if that was your intent of actually casting that particular spell. What this means is, and I'll use, say, the Cure Wounds thing here. If I were to cast Cure Wounds on myself, then what I would do is I would drag the healing effect onto myself, which I'm not damaged in any way, shape, or form, so it's not going to do anything, as well as my wolf. And that's what you would do when it comes to casting the effects. Now, the other thing that you could do to save yourself from essentially having to drag and drop that twice is you target yourself, it'll make one roll, and it'll apply the effects to both of those creatures. When it comes to, say, Barkskin, although I don't think the Ranger actually gets Barkskin, but let's say it did, then you would drag the AC bonus that Barkskin gives you onto the wolf and onto yourself. The only real limitation is that your companion has to be within 30 feet of you. But here's the thing, it doesn't even have to be within visual range. It could be on the other side of a wall, completely out of your line of sight, and the effect will still take place. This is because the bond that exists between you and your companion is magical in nature. So the effects travel through that magical bond and thus are applied to both of you. In addition to that, the description actually doesn't restrict you that it has to be within line of sight. So it's kind of a technicality there. I prefer my previous explanation as to the magical bond side of it rather than the fact that the description just simply doesn't have that limitation applied. Now, this isn't one of those features that we have to go through and add to our Actions tab, although it might generally be a good idea to drag and drop it and group it into your Beast Master grouping so that whenever the Dungeon Master goes, I'm not familiar with that spell, can you show me the description of it? You just drag and drop it into place. But you can get to that through your ability screen. If you happen to be on your Actions tab, though, it just saves you having to flip back and forth. But in conclusion, I can see why this subclass is not really played as frequently as the others, but I feel it's only because players might kind of have a feeling that the attack action restrictions are a little bit too much. What might not be readily apparent is that essentially your companion is not a friend, it is not a familiar, but it is a weapon that your character is wielding. It just happens to be that you're not necessarily holding it in your hands. Now, granted, over time, your character is essentially building a bond with that particular companion, so theoretically it becomes your friend. But by the rules that 5th edition is creating this link between the two of you, it really is just a weapon that you happen to be wielding. It just happens to walk beside you, as opposed to something that sits in a sheath or strapped over your shoulder. But the end result is your character is technically still taking part of all of those combat rounds, but it is more involved in directing your companion around rather than directly wielding the sword that is making the attack swing, or the bow that happens to be making the ranged attack. And over time, as that bond grows into a higher level of trust, there's an effect that more options open up. This is not really unlike what happens with other subclasses and their abilities as you gain them. It just so happens that you're doing it between you and a companion rather than a series of features that apply strictly to you and you alone. But I still feel that this particular subclass is very underplayed, and I really have not seen it used in any campaign that I've been involved in. So I hope this video brings some of those concerns to light and sheds a little bit of the mystery around that aspect of it, and we gain a little bit more in the way of Beastmasters in the future as a side effect. But this brings us to the end of this particular video, so I hope you have found it informative and managed to find something useful in it. Thank you very much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. I wish to thank you for taking the time to watch this particular video. I hope you found it informative and useful to familiarizing yourself with Fantasy Grounds in general, and that you had fun in the process. If you found the video useful and you liked the content of the particular video, go ahead and click that like button to let me know. And if you have any questions specific to the topic covered by this particular video, or just have some comments in general, please feel free to post something in the comments section, and I will do my best to respond to any questions that are asked. Additionally, I do release content quite regularly, and it's generally specific to Fantasy Grounds or 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons at this time. So if you'd like to be notified when new videos come out, go ahead and subscribe and click the notification bell to ensure that notification is sent to you when I release a new video.